"Lewis, there's something I never told you about your mother." Those were the words Anthony Hamilton whispered to his son just 20 minutes before the most important race of Lewis Hamilton's life, the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the race that would decide the Formula One World Championship, the race that would change everything. But what Anthony said next would shake Lewis to his core and reveal a family secret that had been hidden for over 20 years. A secret about why his mother really left when he was just 8 years old. A secret that would make this championship battle about much more than just winning or losing. As Lewis sat in his Mercedes garage, his hands trembling as he held his racing helmet. He had no idea that the conversation with his father would unlock 20 years of buried truth. Truth about sacrifice. Truth about love. Truth about the impossible choices families make to protect each other. The championship was on the line. Max Verstappen was ready to fight. But the real battle was just beginning for Lewis Hamilton, a battle that would force him to confront everything he thought he knew about his family. The sun blazed over the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi on December 12, 2021. Lewis Hamilton sat in his Mercedes garage, his hands shaking slightly as he held his helmet. After 21 races, it all came down to this. He and Max Verstappen were tied on points. Winner takes all. Lewis looked across the garage at his father, Anthony Hamilton, the man who had worked 3 jobs to pay for Lewis's karting career, the man who had sold their house to fund Lewis's dream, the man who had been by his side through every victory and every defeat. But today, something was different about his dad. Anthony kept checking his phone. He kept looking at Lewis with eyes that seemed to hold a secret. A heavy secret. "You okay, Dad?" Lewis asked, walking over to where Anthony stood near the pit wall. Anthony forced a smile. "Just thinking about how far we've come, son, from that little karting track in Rida here. The biggest race of your life." Lewis nodded, but he could see the worry lines on his father's face. The same lines that had appeared when Lewis was just 8 years old. The day everything changed in their family. That was the day Lewis's mother, Carmen, had left them. She said she couldn't handle the pressure of racing. She said she needed to find herself. She packed her bags and moved to Los Angeles, leaving Lewis with his father and stepmother Linda. Lewis never understood why his mother really left. Anthony always said she just couldn't handle the racing life. But Lewis felt like there was more to the story. Something his father wasn't telling him. The Mercedes garage buzzed with activity around them. Mechanics worked on the silver car that would carry Lewis's dreams. Engineers studied data on computer screens. Team members rushed back and forth with equipment. But Lewis felt like he was in a bubble. All the noise seemed far away. All he could focus on was the strange look in his father's eyes. "Lewis," called out Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team boss. "We need to talk about the race." Lewis walked over to where Toto stood with the other team leaders. James Vowles, the chief strategist, had papers spread across a table. Peter Bonington, Lewis's race engineer, was studying tire data. "This is it, team," Toto said. "Everything we've worked for comes down to the next 2 hours. Lewis, you've got the pace. You've got the experience. Now go out there and win your 8th championship." Lewis tried to focus on Toto's words, but his mind kept drifting back to his father. Something was wrong. Something was bothering Anthony, and Lewis couldn't shake the feeling that it was important. "The strategy is simple," James explained. "We start on medium tires. Max starts on softs. He'll be faster at the beginning, but we'll be stronger at the end." Lewis nodded, but he wasn't really listening. He was thinking about his mother, about the day she left, about the tears in her eyes when she hugged him goodbye. "Lewis, are you with us?" Toto asked. "Yes, sorry," Lewis said. It's a big debt." Toto put his hand on Lewis's shoulder. "You've been ready for this your whole life. Trust yourself. Trust the car. Trust the team." Lewis looked around at the people who had become his family over the past 8 years. They had won 6 championships together. They had suffered defeats together. They had pushed each other to be better every single day. But today felt different. Today felt like the end of something. Or maybe the beginning. "I need a few minutes," Lewis said, "just to clear my head." He walked to the back of the garage, away from the noise and activity. His father followed him. "Lewis, what's wrong?" Anthony asked. "You tell me, Dad. You've been acting strange all morning. Like you want to say something but you can't." Anthony looked around nervously. "It's nothing, son. Just race day nerves." But Lewis knew his father better than anyone. Anthony Hamilton didn't get nervous. He was the rock that Lewis leaned on, the calm voice in the storm. "Dad, we've been through everything together. The good times and the bad times. You can tell me anything." Anthony's phone buzzed. He looked at it quickly, then put it away. But Lewis caught a glimpse of the message. It was from someone named Carmen. Lewis felt his heart stop. Carmen was his mother's name. "Dad, was that message from Mom?" Anthony's face went pale. "Lewis, it was, wasn't it? You've been talking to her." Anthony sat down on a nearby equipment crate. He looked older than Lewis had ever seen him. The weight of carrying a secret was written across his face. "Yes," Anthony said quietly. "She's been texting me. She wants to talk to you." Lewis felt like the ground was moving under his feet. "She wants to talk to me? After all these years? She's been following your career. She's been proud of you. She watches every race." Lewis didn't know what to feel. Anger? Sadness? Confusion? For 20 years, he had wondered about his mother. For 20 years, he had hoped she might come back. "Why now?" Lewis asked. "Why today?" Anthony stood up and looked at his son with eyes full of pain. "Because she needs to tell you something. Something about why she really left. Something I should have told you years ago." The noise from the garage seemed to fade away. Lewis felt like he was 8 years old again, watching his mother pack her suitcase, wondering why she was leaving, wondering if it was his fault. "What do you mean?" Lewis asked. Anthony took a deep breath. "Lewis, there's something I never told you about your mother. Something that will change everything you think you know about our family." Lewis felt his heart pounding. In 2 hours, he would race for the biggest prize in motorsports. But right now, all he could think about was the secret his father had been carrying. "Dad, you're scaring me." "What is it?" Anthony looked at his watch. "We need to get you ready for the race. But after it's over, win or lose, we need to talk. All 3 of us. All 3 of us. Your mother will be here. She's flying in from Los Angeles. She'll be watching the race from the VIP section." Lewis felt tears starting to form in his eyes. After 20 years, his mother was coming back. But why? What was so important that she would break 20 years of silence? "Lewis, I need you to focus on the race," Anthony said. "Everything else can wait 2 hours." But Lewis couldn't focus. His mind was spinning with questions. Why had his mother really left? What was the secret Anthony had been hiding? And why was she coming back now? "I don't know if I can race like this," Lewis said. "My head is all mixed up." Anthony put his hands on Lewis's shoulders. "Son, your mother left because she loved you. Everything she did was to protect you. And now she's coming back because she loves you. Don't let that scare you. Let it make you stronger." Lewis looked at his father through tears. "Will you tell me what really happened? After the race?" "I promise," Anthony said. "No more secrets. No more hiding. You deserve to know the truth." Lewis wiped his eyes and picked up his helmet. The championship was waiting. The race was about to begin. But now he was carrying more than just his own dreams. He was carrying 20 years of questions. 20 years of wondering about his mother. 20 years of secrets that were about to be revealed. As Lewis walked back toward his race car, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Not just the history of Formula One, but the history of his family. In 2 hours, he would either be the world champion or the runner-up. But more importantly, in 2 hours, he would finally learn the truth about why his mother had left, and that truth would change everything he thought he knew about love, sacrifice, and family. The race was about to begin. But for Lewis Hamilton, the real race was just getting started. Lewis Hamilton walked slowly toward his Mercedes, his helmet heavy in his hands. The garage buzzed around him, but he felt like he was moving underwater. Everything seemed slow and far away. His mother was coming to watch him race. After 20 years of silence, Carmen Hamilton was flying from Los Angeles to Abu Dhabi. But why now? What was so important that she would break her promise to stay away? "Lewis, we need to get you strapped in," called Peter Bonington, his race engineer. "Formation lap starts in 30 minutes. Lewis nodded but didn't move. He was staring at his father, who stood near the pit wall looking nervous and scared. Anthony kept checking his phone, waiting for updates about Carmen's flight. "Dad," Lewis called out. "Can we talk?" Privately, Anthony looked around the busy garage. Team members were everywhere, preparing for the biggest race of the season. But when he saw the look in Lewis's eyes, he knew this couldn't wait. "Come with me," Anthony said. They walked out of the garage and down the paddock toward a quiet area behind the Mercedes hospitality building. It was cooler here, away from the desert sun and the noise of the crowd. Lewis sat down on a concrete barrier and looked at his father. I need to know what's happening. I can't race like this. Anthony sat down next to his son. For a moment, they just listened to the sounds of the circuit. Engines warming up in the distance. Crowds cheering. The excitement of race day building. Your mother never stopped loving you, Anthony said finally. That's the first thing you need to know. Then why did she leave? Anthony took a deep breath. His hands were shaking slightly. Lewis, there's something I never told you about that time in our lives. Something I'm ashamed of. Lewis felt his stomach tighten. What do you mean? When you were 7 and 8 years old, we were spending a lot of money on your karting. More money than we had. I was working 3 jobs, but it still wasn't enough. Lewis remembered those days. The long drives to karting tracks across England. The expensive entry fees. The cost of tires and fuel and repairs. I started gambling, Anthony said quietly. At first, it was just small bets on football matches. But then it got bigger. I was betting on horse races, casino games, anything I could find. Lewis stared at his father. You were gambling our money away? I told myself I was trying to win money for your racing. But I was just making everything worse. The debts kept growing. And then I started betting on racing. Lewis felt cold despite the desert heat. What kind of racing? Formula One races. And your karting races. The words hit Lewis like a punch to the stomach. You were betting on my races? I always bet on you to win, Anthony said quickly. I never bet against you. But I was addicted. I couldn't stop, even when your mother begged me to. Lewis stood up and walked away from his father. He needed space to think, to process what he was hearing. She found out, didn't she? Lewis asked. She found betting slips in my jacket pocket. Thousands of pounds in debts. She saw bank statements showing money missing from our savings account. Lewis turned back to face his father. What did she do? She gave me an ultimatum. Stop gambling immediately and get help, or she would leave and take you with her. Lewis felt tears forming in his eyes. So what happened? Anthony stood up and walked toward his son. I promised her I would stop. I threw away all my betting slips. I deleted the gambling apps from my phone. I swore on your life that I would never bet again. But you didn't stop, did you? Anthony shook his head. 2 weeks later, she found a new betting slip in my car. I had bet our rent money on a horse race and lost. Lewis sat back down on the barrier. The noise from the circuit seemed far away. Now, all he could hear was his father's voice and the sound of his own heart beating. She left the next morning, Anthony continued. But she didn't take you with her. Why not? Because she knew that leaving with her would end your racing career. She knew how much karting meant to you. She knew you had the talent to make it to Formula One someday. Lewis looked at his father through tears. She left to protect my racing? She left because staying would have destroyed our family. My gambling was out of control. We were going to lose our house. We were going to lose everything. She thought that if she left, I would be forced to get help. Did you get help? Anthony nodded. The day she left, I went to my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting. I told them everything. About the debts. About the lies. About losing my family because of my addiction. Lewis wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Have you gambled since then? Not once. Not in 20 years. But the damage was already done. Your mother was gone. And I was too ashamed to tell you the truth. They sat in silence for a moment. Lewis tried to understand what his father was telling him. His mother hadn't left because she didn't love him. She had left because she loved him too much to let his father's addiction destroy his future. Why is she coming back now? Lewis asked. Anthony pulled out his phone and showed Lewis a text message. It was from Carmen Hamilton. I've watched every race for 20 years. I'm so proud of the man he's become. It's time to tell him the truth. Win or lose today, I want to see my son. Lewis read the message twice. His mother had been watching his races. She had been proud of him. She had never forgotten about him. She's been following my career. Every race, every championship, every victory, and every defeat. She's been your biggest fan from a distance. Lewis felt a mix of emotions. Joy that his mother had been watching. Anger that she had stayed away so long. Confusion about what this meant for their family. Does she want to be part of my life again? She wants to try? If you want her to. She understands if you're angry with her. She understands if you don't want to see her. Lewis looked at his watch. 20 minutes until the formation lap. 20 minutes until the biggest race of his life. But suddenly, The championship didn't seem as important as it had an hour ago. I don't know what to think, Lewis said. I'm supposed to focus on racing, but all I can think about is Mom. Anthony put his hand on Lewis's shoulder. She wanted me to tell you something. She said that every time you get in that car, you're not just racing for yourself. You're racing for everyone who sacrificed something to help you get here, including her, especially her. She said that leaving you was the hardest thing she ever did, but seeing you become world champion made it worth it. Lewis stood up and picked up his helmet. Will she be watching from the grandstand? VIP section. Turn 1. She'll be wearing a Mercedes shirt with your number on it. Lewis smiled despite his tears. She still supports Mercedes? She's supported every team you've ever driven for. McLaren, Mercedes, it doesn't matter. She supports you. As they walked back toward the garage, Lewis felt different. The weight on his shoulders wasn't just about the championship anymore. It was about proving to his mother that her sacrifice had been worth it. Dad, there's one more thing I need to know. What's that? Do you forgive yourself for what happened? Anthony stopped walking. I don't know if I ever will. Well, I forgive you, Lewis said. And I bet Mom does too. Otherwise, she wouldn't be coming back. Anthony hugged his son tightly. I love you, Lewis. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. I love you too, Dad. Now, let's go win a championship. As they reached the garage, Lewis felt ready to race. Not just for himself, but for his family. For his father, who had overcome his demons. And for his mother, who had made the ultimate sacrifice. The formation lap was about to begin. But Lewis Hamilton was no longer just racing for a championship. He was racing for forgiveness. He was racing for love. He was racing for a family that was finally ready to heal. But first, he had to survive the most important race of his life. Lewis Hamilton walked back into the Mercedes garage with his father beside him. The noise hit them like a wave. Mechanics shouting instructions. Engineers studying computer screens. Team members rushing around with equipment. But Lewis felt different now. The secret was out. His mother's sacrifice was no longer a mystery. For the first time in 20 years, he understood why she had left. Lewis called Peter Bonington, his race engineer. We need to go through the final race setup. Lewis nodded and walked over to where Bono stood with a tablet full of data. But his mind kept drifting to turn 1, where his mother would be watching. After 20 years, Carmen Hamilton was coming home. The car feels good in practice, Bono said. We've got the right balance for the race. How are you feeling? Different, Lewis said. But good different. Bono looked at him curiously. Different how? Lewis couldn't explain about his mother. Not yet. The team needed him focused on racing, not family drama. Just ready to win, Lewis said. Ready to give everything I have. Across the garage, Toto Wolff was talking to the strategy team. James Vowles had papers spread across a table, showing different tire strategies and pit stop windows. Lewis, come here, Toto called. We need to talk about the race start. Lewis walked over to the strategy table. The plans looked complicated, with different options depending on what Max Verstappen did. The start is crucial, James explained. Max is on pole position next to you. If he gets a good start, we need to stay close and attack later in the race. Lewis studied the data, but part of his mind was somewhere else. He was thinking about his mother, sitting in a plane somewhere over Europe, flying toward a sun she hadn't seen in 20 years. What if Max gets ahead at the start? Lewis asked. We follow him and wait for our chance, Toto said. You're better at managing tires. You're better in wheel-to-wheel racing. If we're patient, we'll get our opportunity. Lewis nodded, but he was thinking about patience in a different way. His mother had been patient for 20 years. She had watched from a distance, loving him but staying away to protect his career. Lewis, are you with us? James asked. Sorry, Lewis said. Just thinking about the championship. But he wasn't thinking about the championship. He was thinking about forgiveness, about second chances, about how love sometimes means letting go. The weather looks good, Bono said. Hot and dry. Perfect for racing. Lewis looked out at the Yas Marina circuit through the garage opening. The track shimmered in the desert heat. Grandstands filled with fans wearing team colors. Flags from around the world hanging in the still air. Somewhere in those grandstands, his mother would soon be sitting, nervous, proud, probably crying. I need to check something, Lewis said. He walked to the back of the garage and pulled out his phone. He thought about calling his mother. But what would he say? Hi, Mom, I know you left because of Dad's gambling addiction, but I forgive you, and I'm about to race for the world championship." Instead, he typed a text message to his father. "Is she here yet?" Anthony replied quickly, landing in 1 hour. "She's nervous but excited." Lewis put his phone away and walked back to his race car. The silver Mercedes looked perfect under the garage lights. Every part had been checked and double-checked. The team had worked all year for this moment. "Time for driver briefing," announced Angela Cullen, Lewis's trainer and assistant. All drivers to the meeting room. Lewis walked through the paddock toward the briefing room. Other drivers were heading the same way. Max Verstappen walked ahead of him, looking calm and confident. The young Dutch driver had no idea about the emotional storm Lewis was dealing with in the briefing room. All 20 Formula One drivers sat around a long table. The race director explained the safety procedures and track conditions. "Weather is clear," the race director said. "Track temperature is 45 degrees Celsius. Be careful of tire degradation in these conditions." Lewis looked around the table at his competitors. These men had been his rivals for years. They had battled wheel-to-wheel at 200 miles per hour. They had celebrated victories and suffered defeats together, but today felt different. Today felt personal. "Any questions about track limits?" the race director asked. Lewis raised his hand. "What happens if there's a safety car in the final laps?" "We follow standard procedures," the race director replied. "All lapped cars will unlap themselves before the restart." Lewis nodded. He had a feeling this race wouldn't be straightforward. Something in the air felt tense. Something felt like it was building toward drama. After the briefing, Lewis walked back to his driver's room. He needed a few minutes alone before the chaos of race day took over completely. The room was small and quiet. A couch, a desk, a TV showing race highlights. Lewis sat down and tried to calm his racing mind. His phone buzzed with another text from Anthony. "She's landed. On her way to the circuit now." Lewis felt his heart rate increase. In less than an hour, his mother would be at the track. For the first time in 20 years, Carmen Hamilton would watch her son race in person. But there was still something bothering Lewis. Something his father hadn't told him. He could see it in Anthony's eyes. There was more to the story. Why had his mother waited 20 years to come back? Why now, on the most important day of his career? What was she going to tell him after the race? A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Lewis, it's time," called Angela. Lewis stood up and took a deep breath. Whatever secrets were still hidden, whatever his mother wanted to tell him, it would have to wait. Right now, he had a championship to win. He walked out of his room and back toward the Mercedes garage. The paddock was busier now. Fans had arrived for the race. Media members rushed around with cameras and microphones. "Lewis, Lewis," fans called out as he passed. "Good luck today." Lewis waved and smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about a little boy who used to race go-karts while his mother cheered from the fence. He was thinking about a woman who had given up everything to protect her son's dreams. Back in the garage, the team was making final preparations. The car was fueled and ready. The tires were warmed and mounted. Everything was perfect. "How are you feeling?" Toto asked as Lewis approached his car. "Ready," Lewis said. "More ready than I've ever been." And it was true. The conversation with his father had lifted a weight from his shoulders. Understanding his mother's sacrifice had given him strength he didn't know he had. "Good," Toto said, "because we're about to make history." Lewis put on his fireproof suit and helmet. As he climbed into the cockpit of his Mercedes, he felt the familiar comfort of the racing seat. This car had been his office for 8 years, his weapon in the battle for championships. But today, it was more than that. Today, it was his chance to prove that his mother's sacrifice had been worth it. "Radio check, Lewis," came Bono's voice through his headphones. "Radio's good," Lewis replied. "And Bono?" "Yes. Whatever happens today, thank you. Thank you for believing in me." Bono paused. "Lewis, are you okay? You sound different." Lewis smiled inside his helmet. "I'm exactly where I need to be." As the garage doors opened and Lewis drove out for the formation lap, he looked up at the grandstands. Somewhere in those seats, his mother was watching. After 20 years apart, she was finally home. The championship was just minutes away. But for Lewis Hamilton, the real victory had already begun. He was racing for love. He was racing for forgiveness. He was racing for a family that was ready to heal. The formation lap was about to start. The biggest race of his life was beginning. But Lewis had never felt more ready. The roar of 50,000 fans filled the air as Lewis Hamilton drove his Mercedes onto the starting grid. The Yas Marina circuit stretched out before him like a silver ribbon in the desert heat. Formation lap complete, came Bono's voice through the radio. "You're looking good, Lewis. How does the car feel?" "Perfect," Lewis replied, and he meant it. The Mercedes felt alive beneath him. Every control was exactly where it should be. Every setting was dialed in perfectly. But more than that, Lewis felt different inside. The secret about his mother was no longer eating away at him. Understanding her sacrifice had given him a calmness he had never felt before a big race. Lewis looked to his right and saw Max Verstappen's Red Bull car. The young Dutch driver was staring straight ahead, his helmet reflecting the afternoon sun. Max had no idea about the emotional journey Lewis had been on that morning. "Okay, Lewis," Bono said. 60 seconds to lights out. Remember the strategy. Good start. Control the race from the front." Lewis gripped the steering wheel and felt his heart rate slow down instead of speed up. Usually before a big race, his pulse would be racing. But today he felt calm. He felt ready. Somewhere in the grandstands at Turn 1, his mother was watching. Carmen Hamilton had flown halfway around the world to see her son race for the World Championship. After 20 years of watching on television, she was finally here in person. 30 seconds. Bono announced. Lewis closed his eyes for a moment and thought about his journey. From that first go-kart his father bought him when he was 6 years old, to karting championships across Europe, to Formula One, to 7 world titles. But most of all, he thought about his mother's love. Love that had been strong enough to let him go. Love that had protected his dreams even when it broke her heart. 10 seconds to lights out. The 5 red lights appeared on the starting gantry above the track. Lewis opened his eyes and focused on the lights. Everything else faded away. The crowd noise, the heat, the pressure. All that existed was him, his car, and those 5 red lights. And it's lights out, and away we go at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Lewis got a perfect start. His tires gripped the hot track surface and launched him forward. But Max was right beside him, the Red Bull keeping pace with the Mercedes as they approached. Turn 1 at nearly 200 miles per hour. Lewis could see Max trying to pull alongside him. The young Dutch driver was being aggressive, looking for any chance to take the lead. Lewis held his line through the corner. He had pole position, which meant he had the right to choose his racing line. Max would have to wait for another chance. "Good start, Lewis," Bono said. "You're ahead by half a second." Lewis settled into his rhythm as they completed the first lap. The track was challenging, with long straight sections and tight technical corners. But Lewis knew every inch of this circuit. He had raced here many times before. More importantly, he was racing with a clear mind. The weight of his family's secrets was gone. He understood now why his mother had left. And that understanding made him feel lighter, faster, more focused. Gap to Max is 0.8 seconds, Bono reported. "He's staying close, but you're controlling the pace." Lewis looked in his mirrors and saw the Red Bull following him. Max was a talented driver, but Lewis had something Max didn't have. He had 20 years of experience. He had the wisdom that comes from understanding sacrifice as they completed. Lap 5, Lewis began to pull away slightly. The Mercedes was working perfectly in the hot conditions. The tires were gripping well. The engine was delivering smooth power. "Gap is 1.2 seconds, Bono said. "You're doing great, Lewis." Lewis thought about his mother sitting in the grandstand. Was she nervous? Was she proud? Was she thinking about the little boy who used to race go-karts while she watched from the fence? "Lewis, how are the tires feeling?" Bono asked. "Good. Really good. The car feels amazing today." And it did. Everything felt perfect. But more than the car, Lewis felt perfect. The conversation with his father had changed something inside him. He wasn't just racing for himself anymore. He was racing for his family. "Lap 10 coming up," Bono announced. "Max is still about 1 second behind you." Lewis could see the Red Bull in his mirrors, but he wasn't worried. Max was pushing hard, trying to stay close. But Lewis had patience. He had learned patience from his mother, who had waited 20 years to see him again. The crowd was on its feet as Lewis completed. Lap 15. He was in complete control of the race, managing his tires perfectly while keeping Max at a safe distance. "Gap to Max is 1.8 seconds, Bono reported. "You're pulling away slowly but surely." Lewis smiled inside his helmet. This was what racing was supposed to feel like. Not desperate or panicked, but controlled and confident. He was driving the race of his life, and it felt effortless. "Lewis, your sector times are incredible," Bono said excitedly. "You're faster than anyone has been all weekend." As they reached lap 20, Lewis looked toward the grandstand at turn 1. He couldn't see individual faces from the cockpit, but he knew his mother was there. After 20 years, Carmen Hamilton was watching her son lead the most important race of his life. "How much fuel are we saving?" Lewis asked. "You're right on target," Bono replied. "Keep this pace and we'll be perfect for the whole race." Lewis thought about fuel strategy, but his mind kept drifting to his family. His father in the Mercedes garage, probably pacing with nervousness and pride. His stepmother Linda, who had helped raise him after his mother left. And his mother, seeing him race in person for the first time since he was 8 years old. "Gap to Max is 2.4 seconds, Bono announced. He's starting to struggle with tire wear. Lewis was managing his tires perfectly. Years of experience had taught him how to be fast while taking care of his equipment. Max was younger and more aggressive, which meant his tires would wear out faster. "This is our race to lose," Lewis thought to himself. "Stay calm. Stay focused. Do it for Mom." On lap 25, Lewis set the fastest lap of the race. The Mercedes was flying around the circuit, and he was in complete control. The championship was within reach. "That's the fastest lap, Lewis," Bono said. "You're in the zone today." Lewis was in the zone, but it wasn't just about racing. It was about understanding. For the first time in his life, he understood his mother's choice. And that understanding gave him strength he had never felt before. "Gap to Max is 3.2 seconds, Bono reported. "You're pulling away from him." Lewis looked at his dashboard. Everything was green. Oil pressure good. Water temperature perfect. Tire were under control. The car was working beautifully. But more than that, Lewis was working beautifully. His lines through the corners were perfect. His braking points were exactly right. His acceleration out of corners was smooth and powerful. 30 laps to go, Bono announced. "Keep this up and the championship is yours." Lewis thought about what winning would mean. An 8th world title, more than any driver in Formula One history. A legacy that would last forever. But mostly, he thought about his mother. About proving to her that her sacrifice had been worth it. About showing her that the little boy she had protected by leaving had grown into a champion. "I'm doing this for you, Mom," Lewis whispered inside his helmet. The race was still young, but Lewis Hamilton was in complete control. He had the fastest car. He had the best strategy. And most importantly, he had a heart full of love and understanding. 30 laps to go. 30 laps to prove that his mother's sacrifice had changed not just his life, but the world of racing forever. The championship was within reach. And Lewis had never felt more ready to claim it. Lap 35 of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton was cruising toward his 8th world championship. The gap to Max Verstappen had grown to over 4 seconds. Everything was going perfectly. "Looking good, Lewis," Bono said through the radio. "You're managing the tires beautifully. Gap to Max is 4.2 seconds. Lewis felt completely in control. The Mercedes was handling perfectly in the desert heat. His lap times were consistent and fast. The championship was just 23 laps away. In the Mercedes garage, Anthony Hamilton watched his son with a mixture of pride and nervousness. The secret conversation before the race seemed to have helped Lewis rather than hurt him. His son was driving with a calmness Anthony had never seen before. "He looks different today," Toto Wolff said to Anthony. "More relaxed, more confident." Anthony nodded but didn't explain. The truth about Lewis's mother would have to wait until after the race. Right now, all that mattered was bringing home the championship. "Pit window is coming up," James Vowles announced over the team radio. "We're thinking lap 40 for fresh tires." Lewis checked his tire temperatures on the dashboard. The rubber was wearing, but not badly. He could probably go a few more laps before pitting. "How long can these tires last?" Lewis asked. "Maybe 8 more laps," Bono replied. "But Max will have to pit soon too. His tires are in worse shape than yours." Lewis smiled inside his helmet. This was exactly what they had planned. Start on harder tires, let Max wear out his softer tires, then use strategy to build an even bigger lead. But as lap 38 approached, something changed. Lewis felt the car starting to slide more in the corners. The rear tires were beginning to lose grip. Bono, The rear is starting to go, Lewis reported. Copy that. We see it on the data. Let's bring you in on lap 40. Lewis looked in his mirrors and saw that Max was getting closer. The Red Bull was still over 3 seconds behind, but the gap was shrinking slowly. Gap to Max is 3.8 seconds, Bono announced. He's finding some pace now. Lewis pushed a little harder, trying to maintain his lead until the pit stop. But the tires were definitely past their best. Each corner required more and more skill to keep the car on the racing line. On lap 39, disaster struck. A car ahead of Lewis suddenly slowed down. It was one of the backmarker cars, and the driver was struggling with a mechanical problem. Lewis had to brake hard to avoid hitting him. What's happening with that car? Lewis asked. He's got engine problems, Bono replied. Just get past him safely. But getting past wasn't easy. The slow car was right on the racing line, and Lewis had to wait for a safe opportunity to overtake. Those few seconds of delay allowed Max to close the gap significantly. Gap to Max is now 2.1 seconds, Bono reported with concern in his voice. Lewis finally got past the slow car, but the damage was done. Max was much closer now, and Lewis's tires were getting worse with every lap. Box, 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 came the call from the Mercedes pit crew. Come in for fresh tires. Lewis dove into the pit lane and stopped perfectly in his pit box. The Mercedes crew swarmed over the car, changing all 4 tires with precision and speed, but something went wrong. Problem with the rear right tire, shouted one of the mechanics. Lewis sat in the car, watching precious seconds tick away on his dashboard clock. The tire gun wasn't working properly on the rear right wheel. Come on, Lewis muttered inside his helmet. Finally, after what felt like forever, the tire was secured. Lewis accelerated out of the pit lane, but he could already see Max's Red Bull flying past on the main straight. You're out in second place, Bono said grimly. Gap to Max is 8.2 seconds. Lewis felt his heart sink. All his hard work in the first half of the race had been erased by a slow pit stop. Now he was behind Max with fresh tires, but a big gap to close. How much time did we lose? Lewis asked. About 4 seconds longer than normal, Bono replied. But you've got fresh tires. You can catch him. Lewis put his foot down and began the chase. The new tires felt amazing compared to the old ones. The car was gripping the track perfectly again. But 8 seconds was a huge gap with only 18 laps remaining. Come on, Lewis, he said to himself. Do it for Mom. She's watching. Show her what Hamilton fighting spirit looks like. Lewis began setting fast lap after fast lap. His times were consistently quicker than Max's, but the Red Bull driver wasn't making it easy. Max was defending well and managing his older tires skillfully. Gap is down to 7.1 seconds, Bono reported. You're catching him, but slowly. Lewis thought about his mother in the grandstand. Was she nervous now that he was behind? Was she worried that his chance for the championship was slipping away? But then Lewis remembered what his father had told him. His mother had sacrificed everything to protect his racing career. She believed in him. She knew he was a fighter. I won't give up, Lewis said into his radio. Not today. Lap after lap, Lewis chipped away at Max's lead. 7 seconds became 6.5, then 6, then 5.5. The crowd was on its feet as Lewis mounted his comeback charge. You're flying, Lewis, Bono said excitedly. Gap is down to 4.8 seconds with 12 laps to go. Lewis was in the zone now. Every corner was perfect. Every braking point was precise. Every acceleration was smooth and powerful. This was Lewis Hamilton at his very best. I can catch him, Lewis thought. I can still win this. But as lap 50 approached, Lewis felt something that made his blood run cold. The car was starting to slide again. His fresh tires were beginning to wear out from the aggressive driving. Bono, the tires are starting to go again, Lewis reported. Copy that. We can see the degradation on the data. You need to manage them better. Lewis eased off slightly, but that meant Max could start pulling away again. It was a terrible choice. Push hard and wear out the tires, or save the tires and let Max escape. Gap is back up to 5.2 seconds, Bono said. Max is managing his tires well. Lewis felt frustration building inside him. He was faster than Max. His car was better than the Red Bull, but strategy and pit stop problems had put him in an impossible position. 10 laps to go, Bono announced. We need something special here. Lewis thought about giving up. The gap was too big. The tires were too worn. Max was driving too well. It seemed hopeless, but then he remembered his mother's words from 20 years ago. The last thing she had said to him before leaving. Never give up on your dreams, Lewis. No matter how hard it gets, keep fighting. I'm not done yet, Lewis said into his radio. He began pushing harder again, ignoring the tire wear. If the tires gave up completely, so be it. But he wouldn't give up without a fight. Lewis, be careful with the tires, Bono warned. I know what I'm doing, Lewis replied. Trust me. Lap 52. The gap was down to 4.6 seconds. Lewis was finding speed he didn't know he had. The car was sliding through every corner, but somehow he was keeping it on track. That's another fastest lap. Bono shouted. You're incredible today. Lewis was driving on pure instinct now. No thinking, just reacting. Corner after corner, he found the limit and went beyond it. Gap is 3.9 seconds, Bono reported. 8 laps to go. You're catching him. Lewis could see Max's Red Bull in the distance now. The championship was still possible. His mother's sacrifice would not be in vain, but neither Lewis nor anyone else. In the paddock knew what was about to happen next. In just 3 more laps, everything would change. The race would take a dramatic turn that nobody could predict, and Lewis Hamilton's world championship dreams would hang by the thinnest of threads. Lap 55 of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton could see Max Verstappen's Red Bull ahead of him, just 3 seconds away. 5 laps to go. 5 laps to win his 8th world championship. Gap is 2.8 seconds, Bono reported through the radio. You're catching him fast, Lewis. Don't give up now. Lewis felt his heart pounding inside his chest. His tires were sliding on every corner, but somehow he was still getting faster. This was what 20 years of racing experience felt like. This was what his mother's sacrifice had built. In the grandstand at Turn 1, Carmen Hamilton watched her son's comeback with tears streaming down her face. She had flown halfway around the world to see this moment. After 20 years of watching on television, she was finally here to witness her son's greatest battle. Come on, Lewis, she whispered. You can do this. Lap 56. Lewis was now just 2.2 seconds behind Max. He could see the Red Bull clearly now, could see Max's helmet moving as the young Dutch driver checked his mirrors. He knows you're coming, Bono said. Max is starting to defend, but you're still faster. Lewis approached the DRS zone on the main straight. The rear wing on his Mercedes opened automatically, reducing drag and giving him extra speed. He pulled alongside Max's car at nearly 200 miles per hour. They were wheel-to-wheel as they approached Turn 1. The crowd was on its feet, 50,000 people screaming as the 2 championship contenders battled for the lead. Max defended the inside line, forcing Lewis to take the outside. Through the corner, they stayed side by side. Neither driver was giving an inch. Stay close, Bono said. You'll get another chance. But Lewis knew he couldn't wait for another chance. His tires were fading fast. If he didn't pass Max soon, the championship would slip away forever. Lap 57. 4 laps to go. Lewis tried again on the main straight, but Max was ready for him. The Red Bull moved across to block Lewis's path. It was hard racing, but fair. He's defending well, Lewis said into his radio. But I'm not giving up. Lewis thought about his mother watching from the grandstand, about his father in the Mercedes garage, about all the people who had believed in him over the years. He couldn't let them down now. Through the technical middle section of the track, Lewis found half a second of speed he didn't know existed. His car was sliding sideways through corners, but somehow staying on the racing line. That's the fastest anyone has ever gone through that section. Bono shouted. You're incredible. Gap down to 1.6 seconds. 3 laps to go. The championship was so close Lewis could taste it. But then, everything changed. Yellow flags, came the announcement over the radio. Car stopped on track at Turn 14. Lewis saw the yellow flags waving and had to slow down immediately. Ahead of him, Max was also slowing down. A backmarker car had broken down on the side of the track. This could be a safety car, Bono said with worry in his voice. Lewis felt his stomach drop. A safety car would bunch up the field again. All his hard work catching Max would be erased. They would restart with just a few laps to go, and Max would have the advantage of position. Please, no safety car, Lewis prayed silently, but his prayer wasn't answered. Safety car deployed, came the official announcement. All cars must slow down and follow the safety car. Lewis wanted to scream. He had been so close to passing Max, so close to taking the championship lead. Now they would restart with all cars bunched together. This is not good for us, Bono said grimly. Safety car helps Max. Lewis looked at his fuel gauge. He had been pushing so hard to catch Max that he had used more fuel than planned. If they restarted and had to race hard again, he might not have enough fuel to finish. What's our fuel situation? Lewis asked. It's tight, Bono replied. We might need you to save fuel in the final laps. Lewis felt the weight of impossible choices. Save fuel and let Max win, or risk running out of fuel completely. Neither option was good. Behind the safety car, Lewis thought about his mother. She had made impossible choices too, 20 years ago. She had chosen to leave her family to protect her son's future. She had sacrificed her own happiness for his dreams. If she could make that sacrifice, Lewis thought, I can take this risk. Bono, if we restart, I'm going to give everything, Lewis said. I won't save fuel. I won't hold back. Whatever happens, happens. Lewis, that's very risky. If you run out of fuel, then I run out of fuel. But I won't give up without a fight. The safety car continued for what felt like forever. Lewis watched his dashboard clock tick down. Lap 58. Lap 59. Soon there would be no laps left to fight. Safety car will come in at the end of this lap, the race director announced. 1 lap of racing remaining. Lewis felt his heart stop. 1 lap. The entire championship would be decided in 1 lap of racing. This is it, Bono said. Everything comes down to the next 2 minutes. Lewis gripped his steering wheel tighter. Behind him, he could see other cars in his mirrors. The entire field was bunched up behind the safety car. When racing resumed, it would be chaos. Remember, Bono said, you're in second place. Max is ahead of you. You need to pass him to win the championship. Lewis nodded inside his helmet. 1 lap to pass Max Verstappen. 1 lap to win his 8th world title. 1 lap to prove that his mother's sacrifice had been worth it. The safety car pulled into the pits. Lewis was now following Max around the track at racing speed. The final lap was about to begin. Green flag, Bono announced. This is for the championship. Lewis floored the accelerator and pulled alongside Max as they approached. Turn 1. They were wheel to wheel again, just like they had been for the entire season, but Max had fresher tires. The Red Bull had more grip. As they came out of turn 1, Max was still ahead. Stay close, Bono said. Look for your chance. Lewis stayed right behind Max through the technical middle section. He was looking for any opportunity, any mistake, any chance to get past. Through turn 9, Lewis tried to go around the outside. For a moment, they were side by side again, but Max held his line and stayed ahead. Final sector, Bono announced. This is your last chance. Lewis was right behind Max as they approached the final corners. His tires were sliding, his fuel was low, but his determination was stronger than ever. Into the final corner, Lewis pulled alongside Max one more time. They were wheel to wheel as they approached the finish line. The crowd was screaming. The championship was being decided by inches. Across the finish line they came, separated by less than a car length. The checkered flag waved. The race was over, but Lewis didn't know who had won. It was too close to call from the cockpit. Did we get him? Lewis asked desperately. Did we win? There was a long pause on the radio. Lewis's heart pounded as he waited for the answer that would define his entire career. Lewis. Bono's voice was full of emotion. I'm sorry, mate. Max got you by 0.3 seconds. He's the world champion. Lewis felt like the world had collapsed around him. After leading most of the race, after mounting an incredible comeback, he had lost the championship by 0.3 of a second. The 8th world title was gone. His chance to make history was over, and his mother had watched it all slip away in the final corner. But Lewis Hamilton had no idea that the most important conversation of his life was still waiting for him. Lewis Hamilton sat in his Mercedes cockpit, staring at the steering wheel. Through his helmet visor, the engine was silent now. The crowd was cheering, but not for him. They were cheering for Max Verstappen, the new world champion. Lewis, you drove brilliantly today, Bono said through the radio. That was one of the greatest drives I've ever seen. You should be proud. But Lewis didn't feel proud. He felt empty, hollow, like someone had reached into his chest and pulled out his heart. The 8th world championship was gone. His chance to make history had slipped away in the final corner. "I need a minute," Lewis said quietly. He climbed out of the car slowly, his legs shaking from exhaustion and disappointment. The Abu Dhabi heat hit him like a wave, but he barely noticed. All around him, the paddock was celebrating Max's victory. Lewis walked to the weighing station, as all drivers must do after the race. He stood on the scales in silence, surrounded by officials and media members. Camera flashes went off constantly, capturing his devastation for the world to see. "Lewis, Lewis, how do you feel about the race?" shouted reporters. Lewis ignored them. He wasn't ready to talk about losing. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After the weighing, Lewis walked toward the Mercedes garage. His team members lined up to greet him, their faces showing a mixture of pride and sadness. They knew how hard he had fought. They knew how close he had come. "You were amazing out there," said Toto Wolff, putting his hand on Lewis's shoulder. "That comeback drive was incredible. You showed the world what a champion looks like." Lewis nodded but couldn't speak. His throat felt tight, like he might cry at any moment. He needed to get away from all the cameras and noise. He needed space to process what had just happened. "Where's my dad?" Lewis asked. "He's waiting for you in your driver's room," Toto replied. "Take all the time you need." Lewis walked through the paddock toward the driver's rooms. Fans called out to him, some offering congratulations on a great race, others trying to console him for the loss. He waved weakly but didn't stop to talk. The driver's room was quiet and cool. Anthony Hamilton was sitting on the small couch, his head in his hands. When Lewis walked in, his father looked up with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, son," Anthony said. "You deserved to win that race. You drove like a champion." Lewis sat down next to his father and finally let the tears come. All the emotion he had been holding back poured out. The disappointment, the frustration, the feeling that he had let everyone down. "I was so close, Dad," Lewis sobbed. "So close to making history, and it just slipped away." Anthony hugged his son tightly. "You didn't let anyone down. You fought harder than I've ever seen you fight. Your mother saw that. The whole world saw that." At the mention of his mother, Lewis looked up. "Is she still here? Did she see the race?" "She saw every lap," Anthony said. "She's waiting outside. She wants to talk to you, but only if you're ready." Lewis wiped his eyes with a towel. "I don't know if I can face her right now. I wanted to win for her. I wanted to prove that her sacrifice was worth it." "Lewis, listen to me," Anthony said firmly. "You already proved that. The way you raced today, the way you never gave up, that showed her everything she needed to see." There was a soft knock on the door. "Lewis?" came a woman's voice. "It's Mom. Can I come in?" Lewis felt his heart stop. After 20 years, his mother was just outside the door. The voice he remembered from his childhood, slightly older now, but still unmistakably hers. "Come in," Lewis said quietly. The door opened slowly, and Carmen Hamilton stepped into the room. She looked older than Lewis remembered, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes. But her smile was exactly the same as it had been 20 years ago. "Hello, my beautiful boy," she said softly. Lewis stood up and looked at his mother. She was smaller than he remembered, more fragile, but her eyes were bright with tears and love. "Mom," was all Lewis could manage to say. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. 20 years of separation, 20 years of wondering, and missing and hoping, all of it hanging in the air between them. Then Carmen stepped forward and hugged her son tightly. Lewis felt like he was 8 years old again, safe in his mother's arms. "I'm so proud of you," Carmen whispered. "So incredibly proud." "But I lost," Lewis said into her shoulder. "I didn't win the championship." Carmen pulled back and looked at her son's face. "You won something much more important than a championship today." "What do you mean?" "You won my heart all over again. Watching you race today, seeing how hard you fought, how you never gave up even when everything went wrong. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Lewis felt fresh tears starting. "I wanted to make you proud. I wanted to prove that leaving was worth it." "Oh, Lewis," Carmen said, taking his hands in hers. "You proved that years ago. The first time you won a race. The first time you won a championship. Every time you got in that car and chased your dreams." Anthony stood up from the couch. "I'll give you two some privacy," he said. "You have a lot to talk about." But Carmen shook her head. "No, stay. This involves all of us. We're a family." The three of them sat down together on the small couch. Lewis was in the middle, with his parents on either side. For the first time in 20 years, the Hamilton family was together. "I know your father told you about his gambling problem," Carmen said, "and I know you understand why I left. But there's something else. Something I need to tell you both." Louis looked at his mother with curiosity. "What is it?" Carmen took a deep breath. "When I left, I didn't just move to Los Angeles. I went there because I was sick. Very sick." Louis felt his stomach drop. "What kind of sick?" "I had depression. Severe depression. The stress of your father's gambling, the pressure of the racing world, trying to keep our family together. It all became too much. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't function." Anthony reached over and took Carmen's hand. "You never told me how bad it was." "I couldn't," Carmen said. "I was ashamed. I thought I was weak. I thought I was failing as a mother and a wife." Louis felt a new understanding washing over him. His mother hadn't just left because of his father's gambling. She had left because she was fighting her own demons. "So you went to Los Angeles to get help?" Louis asked. Carmen nodded. "I checked myself into a treatment center. I spent 6 months learning how to manage my depression, learning how to be healthy again." "Why didn't you come back when you got better?" Louis asked, Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "Because by then, you and your father were doing so well without me. Your racing career was taking off. Your father had overcome his addiction. I thought coming back would just disrupt the progress you had both made." Louis shook his head. "We needed you, Mom. I needed you. I know that now," Carmen said. "But at the time, I thought staying away was the best thing I could do for you. I was wrong about that." Anthony squeezed Carmen's hand. "We were all doing the best we could with what we knew then." Carmen looked at both her son and her ex-husband. "I've spent 20 years watching Louis race on television. 20 years being proud of him from a distance. 20 years wanting to call and write and visit, but being too scared to disrupt his life." "What changed?" Louis asked. "Why did you come today?" Carmen smiled through her tears. "Because I realized that watching you become world champion 7 times wasn't enough anymore. I needed to see you race in person one more time. I needed you to know that your mother never stopped loving you." Louis hugged his mother again. "I love you too, Mom. I never stopped loving you." As they sat together in the small room, Louis realized something important. He had lost the championship today, but he had gained something much more valuable. He had his family back. He had answers to questions that had haunted him for 20 years. And he had the knowledge that his mother's love had never wavered, even when she was far away. But there was still one more secret waiting to be revealed. One more truth that would change everything Louis thought he knew about his family. And his mother was about to tell him. Carmen Hamilton looked at her son with eyes full of love and sadness. The small driver's room felt like a sanctuary from the chaos of the paddock outside. For the first time in 20 years, the Hamilton family was together. "There's one more thing," Carmen said softly. "Something I've never told either of you. Something that changes everything about why I really left." Louis felt his heart rate increase. After all the secrets and revelations of the day, what could possibly be left to discover? "What is it, Mom?" Louis asked. Carmen stood up and walked to the small window overlooking the Abu Dhabi circuit. The track was mostly empty now, with only a few marshal cars cleaning up debris from the race. "When you were 7 years old," Carmen began, "I got a phone call that changed my life forever." Anthony leaned forward on the couch. "What kind of phone call?" Carmen turned back to face her family. "It was from a man named Dr. Michael Rodriguez. He was a specialist at the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles." Louis felt confused. "A doctor? What did he want?" "He had been following your karting career," Carmen explained. "Someone had sent him videos of you racing, and he noticed something that no one else had seen." "What did he notice?" Anthony asked. Carmen sat back down between her son and ex-husband. "Louis, do you remember when you were little, how you used to get terrible headaches after long karting sessions?" Louis nodded. "Yeah, I thought it was normal. From wearing the helmet for so long." "We all thought that," Carmen said. "But Dr. Rodriguez saw something different in the way you moved your head during races, the way you would shake it between corners." "I still do that sometimes," Louis said. "It helps me focus." Carmen took a deep breath. Dr. Rodriguez thought, "You might have a rare neurological condition, something that could get worse as you got older, something that could be dangerous if you kept racing." Louis felt like the room was spinning. "What kind of condition?" He called it exercise-induced vertigo syndrome. "It's very rare, but it can cause severe balance problems and blackouts during intense physical activity. Anthony stared at his ex-wife. You never told me about this phone call. Because I was terrified, Carmen said. Dr. Rodriguez wanted us to bring Lewis to Los Angeles for extensive testing. He said if the tests confirmed his suspicions, Lewis would never be able to race again. Lewis felt his world shifting beneath him. So what did you do? I spent 3 weeks researching everything I could about this condition. I talked to other doctors. I read medical papers. I lost sleep for weeks worrying about your future. Carmen's eyes filled with tears as she continued. And then I made the hardest decision of my life. I decided not to tell you or your father about the doctor's call. Why? Lewis asked. Because I realized that taking away your racing would destroy you more than any medical condition ever could. Racing wasn't just what you did, Lewis. It was who you were. It was your soul. Anthony reached over and took Carmen's hand. So you carried this secret alone. Carmen nodded. I told Dr. Rodriguez that we wouldn't be coming to Los Angeles, that we were going to let Lewis keep racing and hope for the best. But you left a few months later, Lewis said. Was it because of this? Partially, Carmen admitted. Your father's gambling was real, and it was destroying our family. But I was also carrying this terrible fear that something might happen to you on the track. Every time you got in that go-kart, I was terrified it might be the last time I would see you healthy. Lewis looked at his mother with new understanding. So you left because you couldn't watch me race anymore? I left because I loved you too much to take away your dreams, but I wasn't strong enough to watch you chase them. I was afraid that if I stayed, my fear would eventually make me tell you about the doctor's call, and then you would have given up racing to make me feel better. The room fell silent. Lewis tried to process what his mother was telling him. She had sacrificed her own happiness and her relationship with her family to protect his racing career from a medical threat that might not even exist. Mom, Lewis said quietly, did you ever find out if the doctor was right? Do I actually have this condition? Carmen smiled through her tears. Lewis, you've been racing for 25 years since that phone call. You've driven Formula One cars at 200 miles per hour thousands of times. You've won 7 world championships. If you had a serious neurological condition, we would know by now. Anthony shook his head in amazement. So Dr. Rodriguez was wrong? Either wrong, or Lewis was one of the lucky ones who outgrew the symptoms, Carmen said. But at the time, I couldn't take that risk. I couldn't be the mother who destroyed her son's dreams because of a medical possibility. Lewis stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the Abu Dhabi circuit, the place where he had just lost the championship, but gained so much more. Do you know what this means? Lewis said, turning back to his parents. What? Carmen asked. It means you didn't just sacrifice our family for my racing career. You sacrificed it for a racing career that might have been taken away anyway. You gave up everything on a hope and a prayer that I would be okay. Carmen wiped her eyes. It was the only choice I could make as your mother. I would rather live with the pain of being apart from you than live with the guilt of destroying your dreams. Lewis walked back to the couch and knelt down in front of his mother. Mom, do you realize what you've done? You've spent 20 years carrying this fear alone. 20 years wondering if you made the right choice. Every single day, Carmen whispered. And today, Lewis continued. You watched me race for 2 hours at the highest level of motorsport, fighting for the world championship, proving that Dr. Rodriguez was wrong. You watched me prove that your sacrifice was worth it. Carmen started, crying harder. But you didn't win the championship. You lost because of everything I put you through. The emotional stress of our conversation before the race. Mom, stop, Lewis said firmly. I didn't lose because of you. I lost because sometimes, even when you do everything right, things don't go your way. That's racing. That's life. Anthony joined them, putting his arms around both Carmen and Lewis. Son, you may not have won the championship today, but you won something much more important. You proved that you're strong enough to handle anything. Racing pressure, family secrets, disappointment, forgiveness. You're a champion in every way that matters. Lewis looked at both his parents. We're all champions. Dad, you overcame your addiction and became the father I needed. Mom, you made impossible choices to protect my future. And me? I learned that love is more important than any trophy. Carmen smiled through her tears. So what happens now? Can we be a family again? We never stopped being a family, Lewis said. We were just a family that was spread across the world, carrying secrets we didn't know how to share. Anthony squeezed them both tighter. No more secrets. No more hiding. From now on, we face everything together. Louis nodded. Win or lose. Good times or bad. We face it together. Carmen looked at her son with pride that had nothing to do with racing trophies. Louis, I want you to know something. Watching you race today, seeing how you fought and never gave up, seeing the man you've become, that was worth every day of the last 20 years. And Mom, Louis said, I want you to know that understanding your love, understanding your sacrifice, that's worth more than any championship. You didn't just save my racing career. You taught me what real love looks like. As the three of them sat together in the quiet room, Louis realized that this day had been about much more than Formula One. It had been about forgiveness, about understanding, about the lengths that families will go to protect each other. That he had lost the championship, but he had won his family back. And in the end, that was the victory that would last forever. Outside, the desert stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The race was over, but for the Hamilton family, a new chapter was just beginning. 20 years of separation, 20 years of secrets, 20 years of sacrifice and love. And finally, they were home. That we'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us what city or country you're in. It's amazing to connect with people from all around the world who love great stories. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us reach more people who might need to hear stories about forgiveness and family love. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for many more interesting videos like this one. We share stories that inspire, educate, and remind us what's truly important in life. Most importantly, please share this video with your friends and family. In a world that can sometimes feel divided, stories like this help spread kindness and awareness about the power of unconditional love and second chances. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most important races we win are the ones that bring us home to the people we love. See you in the next story.